fragmentation. So you see the Palestinian areas have all been fragmented into what we call areas A, B, and C. And then there's Gaza, which is basically a cage. So people can't go in and out. But in the West Bank, you have areas A, B, and C, and then Jerusalem is also disconnected. Palestinians in the West Bank can't go into Jerusalem to pray at Al-Aqsa, for example. They're not allowed into the city. So that you have really, in a sense, a number of Palestinian peoples that Israel is not only fragmented the land, it's fragmented the people as well. So you have Palestinians in the West Bank that are limited to being in the West Bank. You have Palestinians in East Jerusalem who are disconnected and isolated from the rest of the Palestinians in the occupied territory. You have Palestinian citizens of Israel, about 1.5 million Palestinians that are citizens of Israel, about 20% of the population, that also are disconnected from Palestinians in other areas. Palestinians of Gaza were completely isolated. Then Palestinians in the refugee camps, and Palestinians in the diaspora. So the Palestinian people itself has been fragmented into 5 or 6 pieces, and the leadership as well. So fragmentation is a part of the matrix of control. 96% of the Palestinians in the West Bank have been pushed into these areas A and B. Area A, these darker brown areas of the West Bank, are around the major Palestinian cities. On paper, and only on paper, they're under the exclusive control of the Palestinian Authority, headed by Mahmoud Abbas. In other words, Area A is supposed to be extraterritorial, sovereign Palestinian territory. So what we can say is, after all these years of negotiations, beginning in 1991 in Madrid, going through the Oslo process and others, after 1988, when the Palestinians accepted the two-state solution, all the Palestinians have received from Israel is the Area A is 18% of the occupied territories, and that's divided, as you can see, into all these islands. All the Palestinians have gotten from Israel is 18% of 22% of their historic homeland. So fragmentation. And then you have the settlements. All these blue areas and the pink areas that are settlement blocks all through the West Bank are in what's called Area C, which is the 62% of the West Bank completely controlled by Israel, in which the Palestinian Authority can't even set foot in Area C. That's where the settlements are. There's about 200 settlements. More than 500,000 Israelis living in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. And settlements is a word that, it's not a good word because it minimizes. For example, Mali Adumin here is about 50,000 people. You have other settlements in East Jerusalem that are 60, 70, 80,000 people. So these are massive urban areas that are really irreversible. Israel's not going to leave them. And then, of course, what Israel has done is lay a matrix of infrastructure over all of this. It isn't only that the settlements are there and so on, but you can see a whole system of 29 major highways that link the settlements into Israel itself, reconfigure the country. So today, I would argue, there is no more West Bank. There is no place where a Palestinian state could emerge. There's no West Bank, there's no coherent territory, there's areas A, B, and C, and at the same time, Israel itself has expanded so that with its highways and its settlements, Israel is indeed over the entire country. Israel has, in fact, made this one country. But it's confined the Palestinians to all the nooks and crannies in between the highways and the settlements of Israel. So part of the process of moving, so Israel wants two things of Palestinians. One is that they leave the country. That's the ideal that they leave. And in fact, the Israeli policy is what we call selective transfer. And that is the trying to get the middle classes of Palestinians out of the country. But obviously most Palestinians, there's 4.5 million Palestinians in the occupied territory, are not going to leave. And so the idea is to take the Palestinians that are there and again shove them into areas A and B. That's what Israel's intending, and that's where the policy of house demolitions comes in. Because Palestinians own Area C. They're farmers, that's where they own land. So if I'm a Palestinian, 70% of the Palestinians live under the poverty line. So I can't afford to move into Area A, near Ramallah, where the prices of land is crowded, the prices of land are high. I can't afford that. I own land in Area C. And that's what I can give my sons when they want to marry. I can give them a place to live, I can help build them a house. So Israel's policy is to demolish homes that Palestinians build in Area C and East Jerusalem, but also inside Israel. I want to make this point again. We can't separate the occupation from the rest of Israel. It's the same processes going on. One of the slogans we have in Israel is we never finish 1948. It's ongoing within Israel. So that last year the Israeli government demolished 3 times more houses of Israeli citizens, all of whom are Arabs, of course, either Palestinians or Bedouins, inside Israel, than they do in the occupied territories. So let me just show you, okay? Are you worshiping? Okay. So, so let me just take a few minutes, and because I want to go from this big political analysis down to what's really happening on the ground. I'm an anthropologist. I don't know if you have anthropology at the university here, but anthropologists approach the world from the ground up. Our analysis, I mean, it comes from books, obviously, but our analysis really comes from reading the landscape. What's happening on the ground? What does it mean? The basic question of anthropology, which I say is the basic question of life, is what in the hell is going on here? That's the question. And the hell part is important because that's the critical part. Every journalist will say, what's going on here? But to be critical, what in the hell is really going on here? That's an anthropological question. And that's where the house demolition issue lets us really get in and see in depth what's going on. This is a Shawamri family. Salim, his wife Arabia, and their 6 children. They live in a town right near Jerusalem that's called Anata in the West Bank. Salim and Arabia are the children of refugees from 1948. Salim grew up in the Shuafat refugee camp in Jerusalem. His wife and his cousin Arabia, her part of the family after 48 went to Jordan, where she grew up. And then they were married, and they lived for 10 years in Saudi Arabia, where Salim was an engineer. Then, when the Oslo peace process began in the early 1990s, and Israel promised that no more houses would be demolished, like thousands of other Palestinian families, they came home to help rebuild their country. They bought a small piece of land in Anata, which is very close to the Shuafat refugee camp, but it's in the West Bank. So